It's interesting to note that the three people who are given to us to think about in the parable for tonight were not guilty of any particular serious sin, yet one of them was thrown out into the darkness. This is a parable about the judgment, and most Catholics understand that a person dies with an unrepented serious sin that he will never see God. He will be subject to permanent exclusion by his own decision to live apart from God for eternity. That's what hell is. That's what it means when it says the outer darkness. So the question is, if a person is not living a seriously sinful life, then what else is there for the judgment? And the answer is, people must use the gifts that they've been given by God, and we are accountable to Him for how we use the gifts that He has given to us. There are many examples. I can tell you one of the important saints from she wasn't originally from the U.S., but she became a citizen here, was a woman who came over from Italy, and she worked in the Western Hemisphere. She founded 67 institutions, hospitals, and schools, and orphanages. She was not a CEO of any large company because that would have been impossible. She didn't own anything herself. She had a very thick accent. She was not very impressive to look at her, but she used every gift that God had given her. Her name was Frances Xavier Cabrini. She was completely dedicated to God. And at one point, she was in Chicago. She wanted to establish a hospital there. She always called her hospitals Columbus Hospital, and they still exist. So she went to tell the Archbishop of Chicago. Apparently, he didn't see her or something, so she saw his assistant, whose name was Edward Hoban, who later became the Archbishop of Cleveland. And Monsignor Hoban said to her, "Well, you'll never do it." She did it. Ironically, in our cathedral, we have a statue of St. Frances Xavier Cabrini looking down at the tomb of Archbishop Hoban. Very interesting. God has a sense of humor, you know. Closer to our day and age, we have, first, the example of Pope John Paul II. Now, Pope John Paul II could have become a playwright, a poet, an actor. He was very gifted with languages. He was a brilliant man. He had 2 doctoral degrees. I mean, most people never get one, you know. He had a very strong personality. He was a charismatic individual. And he put all of the gifts that he had been given into the service of God, rather than using them for other things. He could have, but he didn't. He understood that life is not about what I can get out of it, but rather life is a gift from God, and He expects us to use what He has given us for His greater glory and for building up the kingdom and serving others. The kingdom means the kingdom that He came to found, which is the kingdom of justice, love, and peace. It doesn't mean kingdom in an earthly sense. So John Paul, given all these gifts, he put them to good use for years. I mean, from an early age. The earlier a person meets God, the better. Yes, there are people who convert late in life. And that's a blessing. But it's certainly a blessing to start work early. The first reading talks about, let's say, an ordinary person. The woman who is praised not for her beauty or her charm. And those things are gifts, but there is more to life than simply how people look. She's praised for being industrious, being dedicated to her family, and being charitable. Actually, it's the worthy wife. This is what we're talking about here. So everybody has gifts, and having gifts that are used to build up the home, that's a great blessing. We need dedicated mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, give themselves to the service of the family. Family life is suffering in our nation. And it really comes down to people understanding that they have a mission from God, and He gives gifts. Most people are called to marriage, which is understandable. To use that gift and put it to the service of God, this is using talents that God has given. People who have gifts and they don't use them, or they abuse them, this is wrong. It does not help anyone. It's self-serving, selfish. The man who took his one talent and put it in the ground, that's what that's all about. Then there are people who are not particularly gifted. In fact, we might call them disadvantaged. One famous example comes to mind. A girl who was born, she was deformed, she was blind, she was very small. Now, her parents really weren't very happy about that. So when she was about 6, they walled her up in a room. And they fed her under some sort of a vent or an opening or something. But she was walled up for 14 years. She got out of her little prison, and somebody had been teaching her the Catholic faith. So she wanted to become connected with the Dominican order. Well, she couldn't actually join it, but she became a third order member, like an associate member of a religious congregation. And she would beg on the street because she couldn't work. But she was completely dedicated to God, did whatever she could to help people. And at her funeral, when she died at the age of 33, a girl who was at the funeral was cured of her paralysis. I mean, it was a miracle already. This particular woman I'm talking about, who lived as a child, basically walled up and not allowed to really do anything until she got older, was named Margaret Costello. But she used the talent that she was given, put it at the service of God. St. Francis de Sales says, whatever you are, be good at it. You're a mother, father, employer, employee, give it everything. St. Paul says, whatever we do, do it for God and not for men. So we're not looking for attention, but we're looking to use what God has given to us. If a person is suffering through sickness, then suffer well. That's what St. Bernadette said in the convent. He finally entered. He was the one who saw the Blessed Mother in Lourdes when she was 14, but she was older, she entered the convent, but she became very sick. So somebody wanted her to do something, or said something to her about, well, how do you justify yourself? And she said, well, my job is to be sick. She was completely dedicated to God. So we can take even the little that we have and give God glory, make a difference in the world through our prayers and through our spirit of service, so that when we die, we go to the judgment, The Lord can say to us, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter into your master's joy."